Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back to a time when sandals were standard. Gods were everywhere. And your biggest morning problem wasn't email, it was thousands of angry bees living in your walls. That's right. You're waking up as a beekeeper in ancient Mesopotamia. And no, you probably won't survive this one with all your fingers or your dignity intact. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere special, post your location and your local time down in the comments. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink awake in a sun-baked hut near the edge of a barley field. The roof is woven reeds, the air already warm and dry. But before you can even yawn, you hear it the low, hungry buzz of several hundred bees who've taken up residence in a jar on your windowsill. No alarm clock needed, just pure winged chaos. You scramble out of bed, but not too fast, any sudden movement, and they'll interpret you as a threat. That's lesson number 1 of beekeeping. Your home is not really yours anymore. It's a buzzing Airbnb for creatures with barbed butts and bad attitudes. Your back is already sticky with sweat, and your ankles are caked in last week's pollen dust. Your clay water jug is empty. Again. You'd fetch more from the village well, but that means walking past 3 other beekeepers, all of whom are either competing with you or claiming your bees stole from their hives. There's no escaping it. Your entire day revolves around creatures that can smell fear and hate surprises. You shuffle outside, stepping over cracked clay and hardened goat droppings. The first thing you notice, the bees are agitated. That means someone, probably you, forgot to seal a jar properly last night. Or maybe a rival snuck over and stirred things up. Petty sabotage is a thing. Historians still argue whether some beekeepers resorted to hive theft, literally stealing combs from neighboring colonies in the dead of night. It wouldn't be shocking. This isn't a hobby. It's a cutthroat business disguised as a buzzing nightmare. You try to breathe slowly, but the air is already thick. You walk to your hive, really just a horizontal clay cylinder with a lid that never quite fits right, and start your morning inspection. That means lifting the lid with your bare hands and hoping they're too groggy from the cold night to sting. Spoiler, they're not. First sting of the day lands just under your thumb. Fun fact, Mesopotamians didn't have antihistamines. You chew a mint leaf and pretend it's helping. You will repeat this ritual 10, maybe 12 times before noon. The bees, of course, don't care about your job security or spiritual trauma. They care about nectar, about defending their queen, and about making sure you never get too confident. There's something deeply humbling about having your career dictated by insects, with brains the size of sesame seeds. Meanwhile, overhead, the sun is rising like a personal vendetta. This region, modern-day Iraq, isn't exactly known for gentle breezes and shade trees. Your tunic sticks to your skin, and you wipe your forehead with the corner of your sleeve, leaving a smear of honey you didn't realize was there. Again, suddenly there's a sharp thwip from above. A bird, maybe a bee-eater. You watch it swoop down, snatch one of your workers mid-air, and vanish. You mutter something in Sumerian that would probably make a priest gasp. A lot of people think ancient professions were rustic and charming. You're just trying to break even while dodging stings, theft, taxes, and nature itself. And speaking of taxes, you've got a clay tablet sitting inside your hut with a little wedge-shaped note from a temple scribe. It's due soon. The honey quota. They don't care that your hive's moody and your queen might be dead. They want what's owed. A bee lands on your lip. You freeze. You've done this long enough to know that even blinking might provoke it. You whisper an apology. You've apologized to more bees than people at this point. In the distance, someone started a morning hymn. You hum along softly, hoping your bees appreciate the vibe and not the volume. Welcome to the life of a Mesopotamian beekeeper. Underpaid, underappreciated, and one sneeze away from a face full of stingers. And this, believe it or not, is the easy part of your day. You start layering up, not because it's cold, far from it. The Mesopotamian sun is already licking your shoulders like a furnace. But you need protection. Not the good kind, like a beekeeper's suit with mesh netting and thick gloves. No, what you've got is burlap. Scratchy, stinky, loosely woven burlap. You wrap it around your arms and shoulders, binding it under your chin, like you're preparing for a sandstorm. A tunic beneath a ragged scarf for your face, and a pair of leather sandals that have been chewed on possibly by a goat, possibly by something worse. There's a tear under your left armpit, and you pray the bees don't find it. Historians believe early beekeepers wore little to no formal gear. Instead, they depended on layers of whatever cloth they could find, plus thick smoke, and a deeply unhealthy level of tolerance for pain. You, my friend, have developed a Zen-like ability to stand very still while being stung in the same place twice. Your veil is really just a sack with holes poked in it. It muffles your breathing and filters the daylight into a dusty orange haze like you're inside a bee-flavored oven. The only upside: no one can see the expression on your face as you trip over your own hive and land directly into a patch of spiky thistle. Smooth, you mumble, brushing yourself off. One of the bees circles your nose suspiciously. You apologize again. It's your new habit now. You apologize to bees the way modern people apologize to furniture they bump into. You light a handful of dried dung and old reeds in a little clay pot and waft the smoke around the hive's entrance. The bees don't exactly fall asleep. They just get confused enough not to launch an immediate aerial attack. But not always. Last week, one still flew straight into your ear. It stayed there for an hour. The ringing hasn't stopped since. Your daily inspection is grueling. You lift the lid of each hive horizontal tubes made from clay or woven straw, arranged like a row of tiny tombs, and check for honey production signs of disease, and whether any rebellious worker bees are building unauthorized combs. The ancient Sumerians used these hives to produce both honey and wax, both of which were valuable for trade offerings and medicine. But the wax, that's your responsibility too. Which means you get to scrape it off in the heat and try not to pass out. Here's the kicker: if the queen dies, your entire hive becomes a raging anarchist state. No order, no productivity, just chaos and stingers. And remember, there are no backup queens in cold storage. Historians still argue whether ancient beekeepers had methods for requeening hives or simply let failing colonies collapse. Either way, it's your fault now. You peer inside hive number 3 and your stomach drops. No queen. Again. Just a mass of agitated workers and a sticky, half-eaten honeycomb. You mutter under your breath and try to remember which god is in charge of bees. Is it Inanna? She's more love and war. Enlil too busy with wind and kingship. You briefly consider sacrificing a fig to the local river spirit and decide maybe later, after you deal with the small riot happening inside the hive. Then there's your apprentice, a 12-year-old named Ilu, who spends more time chasing lizards than learning bee handling. He's supposed to be bringing fresh water from the canal, but when he finally returns, he's soaked and suspiciously grass-stained. Fell in, he mumbles, holding up a half-empty jar and grinning like it's a prize. You sigh. You're not mad. You were 12 once and probably did the same. But right now, you're wrapped in burlap, smoldering like smoked meat, trying to coax a hive full of hormonal insects into not swarming. And Ilu just dropped the jar. Water seeps into the dust as your bees start to get restless again. Of course they do. It's noon, it's boiling, and you haven't eaten. Your lunch is 3 dates, and a hunk of barley bread so dry it could sand furniture. You sit under a crooked fig tree, chewing slowly, watching the hive like a hawk. Bees stream in and out, gathering nectar from fields you'll never visit. You nod respectfully. They're better at this than you are. Then, you spot it, a wasp, hovering at the hive entrance like a thug casing a shop. You flick a pebble. Miss. Flick another. It lands short. The wasp dives in. You shout something profane that even the bees seem to understand, because they surge outward like someone just lit a fire under them. One sting to your knuckle, one to your neck. You trip again, this time into the dung pile. You sit there for a second, trying not to cry, covered in goat poop and shame. Somewhere in the distance, Elu is chasing another lizard. Just another average day in ancient Mesopotamian bee management, where the equipment sucks. The bees have opinions, and you, dear beekeeper, are very much not in charge. You shuffle back toward the hive, smelling faintly of burnt straw, sweat, and disappointment. In your hand is the last bit of smoldering dung. You need more smoke, or else today ends with a swollen face and a trip to the temple infirmary, where the cure for stings is probably chanting honey, smearing, or leeches. Or all three. The smoke works for about 2 minutes. The bees buzz angrily as you hover near their clay hives, waving the pot like a terrified priest swinging incense. You try to hum under your breath something soothing. Maybe they'll think you're part of the wind, or maybe they'll sting you in the eye again. You're willing to gamble. Mesopotamian beekeepers used crude forms of smoke to pacify their hives, usually a mix of dried animal dung reeds and leaves. The goal wasn't to knock the bees out, just confuse them long enough to crack open the hive without losing an ear. Spoiler alert, sometimes you lost the ear. You pop the lid off hive number 5 and immediately regret everything. The bees have been busy, great, but they've also overbuilt. Wax drips everywhere, sticky and thick, and the combs are crooked. You're supposed to harvest the honey soon, but you know better than to take too much. Bees get vengeful when you're greedy. The sting on your neck is pulsing. You reach up to touch it. Big mistake. One finger against the welt sends a jolt down your spine, like the bee left behind a tiny buzzing insult. You groan. "You okay?" Elu asks from behind a tree, still barefoot and holding a stick like a sword. "Do I look okay?" you mutter. He shrugs. "You smell like the gods are mad at you." Accurate. Speaking of gods, the temple priest stopped by earlier. He didn't knock, didn't even greet you. Just strolled in, nose turned up, demanding the honey allotment by next full moon. You tried to explain the hive's production is down, due to weather, that a rival stole combs, that the bees are moody this season. He just handed you a clay receipt tablet and reminded you that temple dues are non-negotiable, especially for commodities as valuable as honey. Mainstream historians agree that honey was an elite product in Mesopotamia, used for sweetening beer-making medicine and offering to the gods. You, however, get none of the glory. You hand over your product in baskets and jars, and the priests slap their seal on it, like they coaxed it out of angry insects in 100-degree heat. And the worst part, you know they don't even use it all. Some of it goes into fancy cakes for rich families. Some ends up smeared on ceremonial idols during feast days. One jar you swear got dumped in a canal as part of a purification ritual. Meanwhile, you're over here licking honey off your fingers in secret, like it's contraband. And here's the thing, you don't even get paid in silver. No, your wages are mostly in kind. A few loaves of barley bread, sometimes some dried figs if the scribe is feeling generous. The only time you ever tasted mead was once during a marriage feast, and even then it was more sour than sweet. You remember the priest's warning. Failure to meet your honey quota may result in the reassignment of your hives, which is a polite way of saying you'll be sent to dig irrigation ditches or scrub temple floors. You sigh and return to scraping wax. Elu, now sitting upside down in a fig tree, calls down. What happens if all the bees leave? You pause. Well, you say brushing your hair out of your face and flicking a bee off your ear. Then we're really in trouble. Historians still argue whether beekeepers had methods to prevent colony collapse. But the fear of losing an entire hive, either to predators' weather or queen death, was very real. You've seen it happen. One day there's a hum, the next silence. And there's something eerie about a quiet hive. No movement, no buzz, just empty combs and the faint scent of what used to be a civilization. Like a ghost town, but for bugs. You shake the thought away and light more smoke. This time the breeze turns against you. It blows right into your face, and you cough hard enough to scare 3 bees, 2 birds, and maybe 1 lurking god. 1 bee stings you in the armpit. Another finds the soft spot behind your knee. You clench your teeth, tears prickling. You're pretty sure at this point you're about 10% bee venom and 90% unresolved spiritual trauma. You glance up at the sky. The sun is now directly overhead, glaring down, like it's judging your work ethic. Sweat pours down your back. You haven't blinked in what feels like an hour. Your tongue tastes like ash and regret. Lunch, Ailu asks cheerfully. You hold up the half-full honey jar like a trophy. Only if you bring it with crushed bee stingers and disappointment. He grins, so same as yesterday. Exactly. The problem with bees, aside from their whole stab-you-with-their-butt attitude, is that they're royalists. Everything, and I mean everything, revolves around the queen. And today your queen is missing. Again. You squint into the hive, gently prying open the waxen comb, like it's a precious manuscript. Worker bees scatter and rearrange like panicked librarians. There's brood here, yes, tiny larvae curled like commas, but no sign of Her Royal Highness. Not in the nursery chamber. Not near the honey stores. Not even hiding behind the wax wall where queens sometimes sulk after a swarm scare. Mesopotamian beekeepers didn't have modern tools like queen excluders or labeled frames. You've got a stick of prayer and an ever-growing suspicion that this colony is about to implode. Without a queen, there's no future. No eggs, no new workers. Just an increasingly bitter cluster of winged anarchists wondering who to blame. And guess what? It's you. You're always the one to blame. You try not to panic. But you also remember what happened last time a hive went queenless. The workers began laying eggs, which shouldn't even be possible, but they did. The combs went messy, the honey turned sour, and then one of the hives tried to invade another. It was like bee civil war. You back away, slowly, hands raised. Not in surrender exactly, more like an ancient gesture of please don't. Ailu peeks over your shoulder. She's gone again. You nod. Looks like. He grins. Maybe she's on a date. You give him a flat look. The only thing she'll be dating is the expiration of this entire hive if she doesn't come back. The bees buzz louder. You can feel their collective anxiety rising like smoke. Bees sense imbalance. A missing queen is like a palace without a monarch. Too many ambitions, too few rules. You wonder if she swarmed if half the hive followed her into the hills somewhere, leaving you with the rebel stragglers. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamian beekeepers could recognize and manage swarming behavior, or whether they simply treated it as divine punishment. You lean toward the latter. Some days it feels like you're less of a bee handler and more of an emotional support human for tiny flying narcissists. You pick up your reed stylus and scratch a note on a clay tablet. Hive number 3, queen absent behavior. Erratic honey, low. It's like writing a breakup letter to your own livelihood. The sun continues its brutal march overhead. Your burlap wrap is now soaked through, clinging to your skin like hot seaweed. You strip off the head covering for a moment and gasp. Air. Actual air. You fan your face only for 3 bees to immediately land on your eyebrow. Nope. Mask back on. Time to check the emergency hive, the backup colony you started last month when hive number 7 went rogue. It's smaller, newer, but with a young queen, hopefully. You approach carefully, every muscle in your legs aching from crouching and bending all morning. You lift the lid. Inside there, she is marked not by color, but by the way the workers clear a path for her. The queen moving slowly, regally across the comb. You exhale. For now, one hive is holding together. You close the lid and take a moment to sit. Just sit. On a stone that's only mildly burning your backside. Bees hum around your head like tiny, irritable barbers. Ailu is throwing rocks at a puddle. Somewhere nearby, a goat screams for reasons only goats understand. You lean back and think for a moment about the irony. The queen is the most important bee in the hive. And yet she's also the prisoner. She rarely leaves. She does all the laying, none of the leading. You, on the other hand, are stung, sunburned, and broke. And somehow you get blamed when she skips town. That's Mesopotamian management for you. You recall a fringe story you once heard from a traveling potter that some bee colonies were believed to be haunted when the queen vanished, and that people would sing funerary songs to lure her spirit back. You're not above trying that, honestly. Should we sing to her? Ailu asks, half joking. You look at the hive, then at the sun, then at your swollen, pulsing hands. Only if it comes with a cup of cold beer. He blinks. What's beer? You groan. You've got to be kidding. You close your eyes for a minute. The bees continue their endless toiling. You envy their purpose. At least they know what they're doing. You're just a sun-drenched babysitter for thousands of emotionally unstable insects. One of them stings your ankle. You don't even flinch. You reach for the honeycomb with fingers that are already trembling. Not from fear. At this point, you're practically numb to that, but from sheer exhaustion. Your body feels like someone wrapped it in papyrus and left it in the sun to bake. The comb is heavy. Good sign. You lift it slowly from the hive wax, crumbling slightly at the edges. It glows like amber in the sunlight, thick and dripping with golden syrup. It's beautiful. It's also not yours. You carry it to your makeshift workbench, a flat stone slab next to an overturned jar, and start draining the honey into a clay bowl. You lick a little from your finger. It's floral, deep with hints of fig blossom and something else, maybe acacia. You allow yourself one sigh of satisfaction before the weight of duty returns. In Mesopotamia, honey wasn't just food. It was sacred. It flavored offerings, sealed tomb jars, soothed sore throats, and sweetened the local beer. But most of all, it was for the gods. You, dear beekeeper, are just the middleman. And middlemen in this society don't get tips. Your temple quota is strict 2 full jars every lunar cycle. Failure means fines. Or worse, reassignment. Digging canal trenches, hauling bricks for ziggurats, or if you're lucky, counting barley in the scribe's quarter. Not exactly a promotion. You wrap the fresh honeycomb in a waxed cloth and place it into a sealed vessel, marked with your family's reed seal. The courier will come soon, probably a teenager from the temple's bee division, which, yes, is a real thing. An entire subdepartment of scribes, priests, and accountants who've never touched a hive in their lives. But they'll weigh your jars with the solemnity of high court judges. Ilu crouched nearby, face sticky from the bit of honey you did let him taste. Why can't we keep more? You shrug. Because they think the gods need it more than we do. Do gods get stung? You snort. Not nearly enough. He wanders off, trailing honey footprints across your mat. You don't stop him. Honestly, the temple boys are so rigid, they might actually respect bee-sticky sandal prints on their fancy floors. You watch the golden syrup pool at the bottom of the jar. Your back aches. Your wrists are swollen. You've been stung a dozen times today. And yet the reward of honey liquid gold feels like a cosmic joke. It's valuable, rare, sought after, and it slips through your fingers every single time. Historians still debate how honey was distributed among temple workers and agricultural laborers. Did some families get to keep a share? Was it rationed, or was it entirely absorbed into the state-run economy of the gods? You lean toward the latter, mostly because you've personally seen the high priest drizzle honey on grilled goat, while you gnawed on a crust of week-old barley bread. And they didn't even offer to share. One time you tried bartering for a honey cake at the market. The vendor laughed. Bee people don't get cake, she said. You get stung. Accurate. You finish sealing the jars, pressing a bit of wax over the mouth, and stamping it with the symbol of your house. A crooked star for the night you were born under a stripe for bees, and a dot that's supposed to represent favor with the gods, but really just looks like a fly someone squashed into clay. You stack the jars carefully and wait. The courier arrives late per usual. He's tall, smug, and wearing a tunic too clean to be trusted. He barely nods, just grunts, and weighs your delivery with a pair of string scales, then jots something on a clay tablet. Light by one finger, he mutters. It's fresh, you say. Still settling. He sniffs. We'll see what the scribe says. You know what the scribe will say. The scribe will say it's not enough. The scribe will say you're holding back. The scribe will file a complaint, and you'll end up in front of the temple accountant, explaining why you're not hiding an extra hive behind your goat shed. You watch the courier disappear down the path, dust rising behind him like smoke from a burned offering. Ilu leans beside you. You think they even eat it? You don't answer. You don't want to think about the priests spooning honey into their mouths while you count stings on your shins. Instead, you sit back and lick a bit of leftover wax from your thumb. It's not much, but it's yours. By the time you finally hobble home, your arms wobble like half-set clay. You've been stung in 5 new places, scraped your knee on a broken jar lid, and you're sweating so much that even your bees are giving you space. But that doesn't stop the whispers. Your neighbor, a potter with 0 sense of volume control, is talking loudly again about you. They say his bees are angry because he angered the storm god. She cackles to someone just out of sight. Or maybe it's the bee goddess. Or the goat spirit. I forget which. You pause mid-step. Your elbow twitches. Not from rage, well okay, a little rage, but mostly from accumulated bee venom. In Mesopotamian villages, beekeepers lived with a peculiar status, essential, but suspicious. Honey was revered, yes. But people didn't love the process. Your swollen face and bizarre rituals made you a perfect target for superstition. And then there's the look. You know, the one people glance at the back of your neck, see the red welts, and suddenly start talking about curses. A guy down the road claims your bees are whispering his name. Someone else swears you trained them to sting thieves. You wish. A week ago, a priest visited your hut for a blessing. You thought finally recognition. But no, he just wanted you to sprinkle honey on a dying calf while chanting something in a tongue you didn't even recognize. The calf lived. Barely. But now you're the one who calls bees and saves animals. Ilu thinks it's cool. He started trying to command the bees with hand gestures. Today, he named one. This one's Jibaru, he said, pointing at a particularly aggressive drone. He's the general. You didn't have the heart to tell him that drones don't sting, and also that Jibaru was a fly. Still, it's hard not to feel odd. You avoid market crowds because someone once claimed their baby got a rash from standing too close to you. Your love life is non-existent. Apparently, you smell like wax, and fear doesn't woo the local shepherd girls. Historians note that beekeepers may have been viewed as both mystical and mildly unclean, depending on the region. Some texts suggest they were welcomed at rituals. Others hint they had to purify themselves before entering a temple. You've never been inside the temple. They take your honey through the back gate. You settle under a tree, rubbing resin into your sore fingers, and think about your cousin, the brewer. He works indoors, in the shade. His tunic is always clean. He gets invited to feasts. His wife makes garlic stew. You meanwhile are still trying to figure out whether the stinger in your foot is from today or last week. Ilu sits next to you, chewing a reed like it's a delicacy. Did you know bees can talk to each other with dances? You nod, staring at the clouds. Yeah. I tried dancing in front of the hive. They didn't like it. I'm shocked. They stung me. Again, shocked. He grins undeterred. Maybe they think I'm cursed too. You don't respond. You're too busy wondering if maybe that Potter woman is onto something. Your bees are especially moody this year. Your last queen disappeared under mysterious circumstances. And last night you had a dream about a river of honey swallowing your hut, while frogs screamed hymns in Sumerian. Maybe it's just stress, or maybe this job does do something to the brain after too long. You've seen other beekeepers crack. One tried to communicate with his hive by whispering poetry into a jar. Another disappeared into the hills and came back 4 days later wearing only a honeycomb skirt. You're still hoping that was a dream. A breeze rolls through, kicking up dust and rattling the reeds. The bees settle, a little buzzing, low and slow, like they're sighing. You sigh with them. The day's almost done. Your next task is applying honey to your own stings, an act so ironic it's practically performance art. A few bees drift near your arm as you smear a thin layer onto a welt the size of a barley seed. It's true ancient Mesopotamians believed honey had healing properties. And not just for cuts. Everything from sore throats to spiritual malaise. One text even recommends mixing it with crushed seeds and smearing it on your soul. You tried that once. Didn't help. Still sore. As the sky softens to that dusty pink that only Mesopotamia can do, you glance at your hives one more time. They're quiet now. For the moment. Inside, they're tending brood-drying, nectar-dancing little circles to map the nearest wildflower patch. You marvel as always at how much purpose fits into something so small. Meanwhile, you just sit here sticky itchy and the talk of the village. Your bees don't care. They never do. And maybe that's why you love them. The sun dips low behind the palms, but your workday's not over. Not even close. You've still got the medicine shift. The part of your job that no one talks about at feasts or wants to hear about when they're gnawing on skewered lamb. Because in addition to keeping bees, you're also the village's unofficial honey medic. Not because you trained with healers or studied under an herbalist, but because you happen to own the one thing everyone believes can fix anything. Honey. Someone shows up with a burn honey, rash honey, cough honey. Goat kicked them in a sensitive area. You guessed it, honey. You're the human Band-Aid stand. Tonight's first customer is an elderly shepherd named Ezdu, limping toward you with a scowl and a bandaged toe that's leaking something unholy. Bee-man, he grunts, sitting on your only stool without asking. Toes possessed. You kneel with a jar and unroll the rag. It smells like regret. The toe's purple angry and twice its normal size. You don't flinch. You've seen worse. Once someone brought you a wound that had insects living in it. Not bees. Something much, much hungrier. You dip 2 fingers into the honey, smear it carefully across the infected toe, while Ezdu winces and mutters curses at the sky. Ancient Mesopotamians used honey in dozens of medical applications. Its antibacterial properties were known even then, though no one knew why it worked. They just knew it did. You suspect they learned by smearing it on everything until something eventually stopped hurting. There you whisper. No more toe demons. Ezdu grunts his thanks and limps off. You don't get paid. He leaves you a semi-cracked jar of goat's milk and a dried fig. The fig has teeth marks. Probably not human. Next patient? A priest's assistant with ritual hemorrhoids. You don't ask questions. You just hand him the jar and tell him to apply it with a reed and maybe some dignity. He nods solemnly and vanishes into the reeds. Then comes a mother with her baby crying from what might be teething, might be spirits, or might just be colic. You rub a drop of honey on the infant's gums and chant a nonsense rhyme you made up on the spot. The baby stops crying. The mother bows. You feel like a wizard. Ilu watches all this with wide eyes. You ever use it on yourself? You raise an eyebrow, lifting your pant leg to reveal a swollen knee that's been steadily changing colors all week. What do you think? You drizzle a thin line of honey down the welt, spreading it with a shaky hand. The sting burns, but there's relief beneath it. Warmth, as if the bees themselves are apologizing. Still hurts, he asks. No, you lie. Historians still debate whether beekeepers doubled as healers or simply got roped into the job because of the honey. Either way, your reputation has expanded. Some call you the bee doctor. Others whisper you're cursed. Some even claim you can summon bees by speaking their language. You let them believe what they want. It's easier that way. At dusk, the final patient arrives, a teenage girl with swollen eyes and fear in her posture. Her family sent her for protection against a spirit that visits during sleep. You recognize the symptoms: anxiety, exhaustion, maybe seizures, but you don't have a cure. All you have is honey and theater. You mix a small potion, honey-crushed poppy seed fig juice, and smear it across her forehead. Then you wave a burning reed around her head in slow circles and whisper a lullaby your mother once sang to you. She smiles faintly. It's enough. When she leaves, you collapse on your mat. The bees are finally silent. Your hands are sticky. Your eyes burn. The world hums faintly and you realize you haven't sat down properly in hours. Ilu lies beside you, chewing on a reed. You think the bees like you? You stare at the ceiling. I think they tolerate me. Is that love? You chuckle softly. Maybe. Or maybe it's just because I haven't taken their honey yet today. He's quiet for a moment. If I get stung, can I sting back? No, you say. But you can scream and throw yourself dramatically into the river. He nods. Good plan. You exhale, letting the weariness wash over you. Your jars are nearly empty. Your limbs are bruised. And yet there's something comforting in the rhythm of all this. The stings, the soot, the strange visitors. You belong to this weird world now, somewhere between crude and sticky. And tomorrow you'll do it all again. Night finally folds itself over the village, soft and warm as a wool cloak. The stars begin to blink to life above you, shimmering faintly through the haze of lingering smoke. Crickets chirp lazily. Frogs begin their grumbling chorus from the reeds near the canal, and the bees. Blessed silence. They've all tucked themselves away, sleeping in the dark, waxy tunnels of the hives like tiny winged monks. You sit cross-legged outside your hut, still sticky in places you stopped trying to clean. Your arms are striped with drying stinger welts. Your breath is shallow and slow. It's the first moment today that you aren't doing fixing, dodging, apologizing, or bleeding. You tilt your head back to look at the moon. It's full round and bright, a reminder that the next temple quota is officially due. Fantastic. Ilu snores softly beside you, his head resting on a rolled-up sack of barley. Earlier, he declared he was training to become a honey warrior. You'd laughed so hard you nearly choked on your own spit. But now he's asleep mouth open, dreaming of bees with swords, probably. You hope they like him. He's going to inherit this mess one day if he's not careful. You close your eyes and listen to the wind. In it faintly is that hum again, not the angry buzz of midday chaos, but the gentle background thrum of hives at rest. A sleepy, satisfied sound. In the Mesopotamian imagination, bees were sometimes considered divine messengers, creatures tied to birth, death dreams, and healing. You're not sure if that's true, but you like the idea. If bees carry prayers, you've sent thousands skyward without even trying. Of course, not all your prayers are polite. Today alone, you prayed for patience, for better weather, for stronger wax, for the temple scribe to accidentally fall into a well. And yet here you are, still breathing, still surrounded by living hives, still not fired. That counts for something. There's a superstition among your neighbors that if a beekeeper sings to his bees at night, they'll dream sweeter dreams and make richer honey. You're not much of a singer, but you hum a low note anyway. Something soft. The kind of sound you'd want wrapped around you while you sleep. Ilu steers you humming to the bees again. Might be you whisper. Do they like it? They haven't stung me for the last 15 minutes, so I'm calling that a yes. He yawns and rolls over. If I had a hive, I'd name the queen Zalala. You blink, that's oddly specific. She'd be kind, he mumbles, but strict. You smile, watching him slip back into dreams. Sounds like a good queen. He nods once, then fades. You sit there a little longer, watching the moonlight paint the tops of the hives in pale silver. You can almost see them breathing. The queens in their chambers. The workers fanning their wings. The sleepy buzz of order in miniature. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamian beekeeping was more science or ritual, whether it was passed down through careful apprenticeships or whispered from one weary keeper to another. You've never had scrolls or scribes. You just have hands' instinct and scars, and somehow despite everything, despite the stings, the sun, the temple quotas, the gossip, the aching joints, you don't hate it. You respect it. You might even love it, though. You'll never say that out loud. Not even to the bees. Especially not to the bees. They'd get smug. A breeze picks up, carrying the scent of fig leaves, clay, and distant wildflowers. You smile. That's where they'll go tomorrow. Northfield. Plenty of blooms. Easy access. You'll walk there at dawn, watch them dance, and drift. And you'll do it all again. Now, as your breathing slows and the bees settle deeper into their quiet rhythm, let your own body soften like wax beneath warm hands. The night air is cooler now, brushing gently against your skin, washing away the heat and sting of the day. The sky stretches wide above you, stars blooming in silence, each one a tiny glimmer of calm. Your arms grow heavy, your thoughts float loose, and even the lingering ache of old stings fades into the soft background hum of resting hives. No temple scribes here, no angry neighbors, just the peace of the earth beneath you, the lull of sleeping bees, and the gentle drift toward dreams. Maybe you're one of them now, curled inside a comb, quiet, safe, and golden. Sweet dreams. Hey guys, tonight we slip off our shoes, step into a palace lit by flickering oil lamps, and follow the scent of saffron sandalwood and roasted lamb. The ceiling above you rises so high, you feel like you've wandered into a dream, if dreams came with gold leaf murals and 17 different varieties of wine sloshing in jewel-toned goblets. Welcome to a royal Persian banquet. But tonight you're not a guest. You're not even a servant. You're the music. And you, dear listener, are blind. And spoiler, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing this community span across cities, deserts, and time zones. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your sandals are velvet more for decoration than protection. A thin silver chain runs around your ankle, a polite reminder that while you're not a prisoner, you're definitely not free. 2 eunuchs guide you with soft taps to your elbow, moving you down a corridor lined with marble and echoes. You count the steps out of habit. You know that 32 means you're close. And then, it hits you. Not a wall, but a wave. Warm air soaked in cardamom and grilled pomegranate quail, mingling with sweat perfume and the deep musk of overcooked ego. You've arrived. The banquet hall buzzes like a beehive that's forgotten its manners. Nobles are laughing too loudly, snapping at servants, knocking over pitchers just to watch someone scurry. Your ears track the scrape of bronze platters, the clink of turquoise-studded cups, the rustle of silk garments so fine they whisper when their owners move. You can't see them, but you feel them. These people are sharp-edged and drunk on power. You reach your platform. It's low, meant to elevate without elevating. You settle cross-legged, the stringed barbot laid across your lap like a fragile beast. You rest your fingers lightly on the strings. The wood is warm from the day's heat, and your calluses hum with muscle memory. Mainstream historical fact: blind musicians were a revered fixture in Persian court life, believed to possess a deeper connection to the divine through their sensory focus and storytelling. Many were trained from childhood, often within specific guilds or families, who passed down oral traditions with obsessive precision. Someone shouts about dates soaked in rosewater. Another demands more honeyed melon. You meanwhile begin to tune not with pegs or gadgets, but with your ears, adjusting each string to the memory of how your grandfather taught you. One breath, one note, one truth at a time. And here's where it gets awkward. You're not alone. There's another musician across the hall. You can't see her, but you can feel her strumming some flute or Comanche, probably rehearsing something moody and minor. She's younger, newer, and absolutely trying to outplay you. Rookie move. Quirky tidbit. It was considered scandalous but thrilling when rival musicians worked coded insults into their melodies during public performances, a sort of polite musical duel. You've done it. You've won it. Tonight you pluck a few sharp notes, bright accusatory, like a slap in a mirror. She responds with a flourish of soft trills that say, "Try me. It's going to be that kind of night." As a servant lays grapes in some noble's mouth like they're feeding a lazy falcon, you lean into your first real phrase. The rhythm starts slow and winding like smoke curling from a censer. It's meant to make them pause between bites. You feel the silence stretch just a beat too long. That's how you know it's working. But it's risky, because historians still argue whether musicians at court were valued artists or simply ornamental servants. Just one clumsy note away from being discarded. And when you can't see the scowls or smirks reacting to your music, you have to feel your way through approval, like a blindfolded tightrope walker over a pit of aristocrats. Your hands glide. Your ears flick like cat ears. You hear one noble mutter, "The blind one again," and another snap. "Hush, I like this part." You let that compliment soak into your bones like warm tea. Then you catch at the sharp intake of breath from a guard stationed near the prince. Someone important just arrived. You don't turn your head. You just change the melody. Subtly. Respectfully. A nod in notes to the new arrival's rumored preference for triplet pulses. Because in this world, sight doesn't make you valuable. Ears do. Memory does. Nerve does. And tonight, you're still in the game. You keep playing even as sweat slides down your temple, disappearing into the collar of your linen robe. The strings hum beneath your fingers like living things, delicate, temperamental, and utterly unforgiving. You pluck strum glide. A minor key modulates gently upward. It's a court favorite, melancholy enough to suggest depth, not so dramatic that anyone spills their sherbet. But this isn't just music. This is timing. Each phrase must land between the chaos between a goblet being raised and slammed between a belly laugh and an insult whispered behind someone's back. Your rhythm becomes the invisible ribbon that ties the banquet together. And now comes the hard part, playing while everyone eats. No one listens when they're gnawing on saffron-glazed lamb. No one claps while their mouths are full of pistachio. But they'll notice. Oh, they'll notice if you hit a wrong note while they're making eye contact with a vizier's daughter across the table. You are background noise and yet completely exposed. Mainstream historical fact. Persian banquets were carefully choreographed affairs. Food was served in specific courses, each dish brought out with a flair that rivaled your own performance. Musicians were expected to complement the flow, never outshine it. Across the hall, the rival musician tries a high flourish on her ney flute. It's pretty, a little desperate. You counter with a simple harmonic bend on your lowest string. It lands like a whisper behind the ears of the seated nobles. You don't need to show off. You just have to stay relevant. And in a moment of bitter irony, you realize the most powerful tool you have isn't your instrument. It's your stomach, because you're starving. You haven't eaten since dawn. That was a cup of watered yogurt and a fig. By now, your insides sound like a distant war drum. Every time a tray passes near the smells, try to hijack your focus, fatty meats, sizzling nuts, the sour snap of vinegar, pickled vegetables. You can't eat until you're dismissed, and you won't be dismissed until they're done using you to impress each other. Quirky tidbit, in some courts, musicians weren't fed at all, unless specifically ordered by the banquet's host. Sometimes they were given leftover bones wrapped in cloth as a gesture of, let's call it gratitude. As you pluck away, your fingers begin to cramp. Not the full-blown claw yet, but close. You shift your grip slightly, mask the fatigue with a few ornamental trills. You know better than to stop and stretch. Even that could be seen as disrespectful. The air is thick now, not just with spice, but with tension. Someone's having an argument in the far corner. You hear the words tribute, betrayal, and cousin. Never a good combo. You weave a calming theme into your melody. Soft, reassuring, like you're the musical version of a servant fanning away the awkwardness. And it works, mostly. Historians still argue whether musicians were trained in diplomacy or simply learned to read social tension as a matter of survival. You're not sure either, but you do know this: if you can't soothe the nobles through your playing, you risk becoming the next scapegoat for a ruined evening. You catch a rustle to your left. A child, someone's daughter, judging by the delicate slipper slap of her steps, tiptoes over to your platform. She's holding something. A fig. A piece of honeyed flatbread. No, wait. She's setting it beside you. She doesn't speak, just leaves it there and walks away. You keep playing. Your fingers still dance, but something inside you softens. You'll remember that kindness. You'll remember her. You shift keys just slightly to a lullaby cadence. It's the sort of thing a child would hum. A subtle thank you in return. And for a moment, the hall feels less like a lion's den and more like a place where music might actually matter. But that moment fades, replaced by the clang of more cups, more politics, more interruptions. Your rival across the room tries another run of notes, a little too long, a little too flashy. You respond with silence, just 2 beats, long enough to make every noble stop chewing. And then you drop a chord, so rich and clean, it feels like someone just lit a candle inside the room. You win this round. You keep going, and you still haven't eaten. You're still playing, still smiling, still pretending you don't notice that your fingernails are wearing thin, and your wrists are quietly pleading for mercy. One more measure, one more phrase, one more round of applause you won't hear, because remember, applause. That's for poets, not players. Tonight, the banquet drags on longer than usual. The air grows close, spiced, smoky, thick, with the sound of chewing, whispering, slurping, and the occasional hiccup from the wine-soaked noble near the center cushion. You can't see him, but you know his laugh anywhere. It's the kind of wheeze that suggests he's built his power on taxes and animal cruelty. Still you play, and then the silence, that awful sudden hush that floods the room like a spilled jar of oil. All heads turn toward the grand platform. You keep playing, of course. What else would you do? But you're watching from the corners of your blind eyes, listening more than seeing. Something's happened. Someone important has just arrived. You feel it in your ribs before you recognize it. Authority has a rhythm all its own. Even its footsteps sound smug. Mainstream historical fact. At the height of the Achaemenid Empire, royal banquets could include dozens of regional rulers, their families and diplomatic guests, all seated according to rank, with the most favored closest to the host. So when the host stands, so does everyone else. Except you. Because your role doesn't change based on status, you are a constant, like gravity or indigestion. But your fingers tremble a little now, because you've just realized who it is. Not a prince, not a satrap. It's the queen, and queens in this particular court have strong feelings about music, especially yours. She once said within full earshot of half the servants that your playing reminded her of a thoughtful stream meandering through a garden of crushed roses. That sounds nice. But then she added, "It would be lovely, if it didn't sound so desperate." You haven't slept properly since. Now she's here, draped in gold-threaded linen kohl like war paint, a perfume so strong it makes your tongue taste jasmine. She settles onto the cushions and gestures. One simple flick of the hand. All eating stops. You know what this means. She wants a solo. No backing flute, no percussion, no second harp. Just you. The room falls silent. Truly silent for the first time all night. Even the fire seems to pause its crackling. You adjust your grip, center your breath. Think of something slow, but not sad. Elegant, but not overreaching. You settle on a scale that borrows from the old Zagros modes, haunting, winding, evocative. You begin. The opening note hovers like dew before dawn. A finger's twitch slides you into the next tone. Your hands aching, as they are, remember how to do this. Muscle memory over anxiety. Heart over hunger. And somehow it works. The queen tilts her head. Not in mockery, not in boredom, but in curiosity. That's when you notice your rival. She's frozen. Her hands twitch on her lap, unable to join or intervene. This is your moment, and even she won't risk ruining it. Quirky tidbit. Some Persian musicians were trained to mimic birdsong or the rhythm of water styles prized by the upper class as natural and thus superior to rigid melodies. So you let your notes flutter a little. Scatter like sparrows. You remember the way Hoand feels on your face in the orchard just outside the city walls. You make that the mood. Nostalgia without naming it. Sadness without sharpness. You finish with a single harmonic ring, a long, shivering thread of sound that fades into the cushions. And then, nothing. No cheers, no nods, not even a polite cough. The queen simply turns her head away and continues eating. Historians still argue whether court musicians were truly valued or merely tolerated as ornamental background to royal ego. In this moment, you're leaning toward ornamental. You lower your hands. Breathe through your nose. Try not to notice how the silence wraps around your chest like a slow, disappointed python. Then a surprise. A handmaid appears, silent as breath. She sets a small dish beside you. It's wrapped, still warm. You feel a pulse of disbelief. It's the queen's leftovers, which in the twisted language of the court might actually mean something. Gratitude or insult, that's the problem with palace life. You never get a clear answer. But for now, food is food, and you are still playing. You wake the next morning, or maybe it's just a few hours later with a start. Not because someone shakes you, or because the trumpets of dawn are blaring from the palace gates. No, it's that ache again. The one in your fingers. It creeps up your forearm like a lazy serpent and settles into your shoulder. You wonder not for the first time how long you can keep this up. You stretch your hands gently like they're made of old linen. The joints click. You wince. Still, you get up. Because this morning is rehearsal. Again. The room where you practice isn't glamorous. It's an old storeroom that now pretends to be a music chamber. There are cracked tiles, a busted lattice window that lets in too much wind in winter and not enough air in summer, and a pile of broken instruments in the corner. You once tripped over a shattered zither and chipped your tooth. The others laughed for 3 days. You sit on the same worn cushion. Lift your harp. It's slightly out of tune, probably from the weather. You fix it by ear, of course. Because what else do you have? Just you, the strings, and the 1,000-year-old question of am I good enough today? Mainstream historical fact, music held an esteemed place in Persian courts, with players trained from a young age in formal schools, especially blind musicians, who were seen as touched by divine artistry. Not that this reverence shields you from petty gossip. One of the younger lutenists whispered yesterday that you only keep your spot because the vizier pities you. That's rich coming from someone who couldn't keep rhythm if you strapped it to his wrist. But you don't argue. You play. You slide into a simple tune just enough to loosen the fingers. Then faster. A more complex phrase. Then faster still. By the third piece, you're sweating. Not because it's hard, because it's desperate. You need to stay relevant. The Queen noticed you last night, which means she'll either request you again or quietly have you reassigned to the stables. Yes, it's happened before. One wrong trill, one forgotten phrase, one moment of lapsed enthusiasm. You're out, and the stables are less forgiving than a cold music room. Still, you keep practicing. Quirky tidbit. Some elite musicians were required to learn at least 3 dialects, not to sing in, but to understand the nuances of their patrons' moods. One misheard joke could cost a career. You remember once years ago, a blind flutist confused a noble's sarcastic comment for a compliment and smiled too earnestly. That flutist now grinds spices for the palace kitchen. No one remembers her name. You return to the melody. Smooth it out. Add the flourishes. You know the nobles like the kind that sound effortless, but take hours to master. And then, footsteps. You stop playing instantly, because only one pair of sandals makes that sound. Light, deliberate, and covered in bells that don't ring unless she wants them to. It's her, the Queen's handmaiden. You sit straighter. She doesn't speak at first, just walks the room slowly as if admiring your lack of decoration. Then with a voice like chilled honey, she says, "The Queen wishes you to compose a new piece." Your mouth goes dry. She wants something fresh, something that makes her forget she's here. That last part is the real assignment, not music. Escape, because banquets are cages for everyone, even the royalty. You nod, because what else can you do? You ask timidly if there's a theme, a mood, a memory she wishes evoked. The handmaiden pauses at the window. Her veil flutters. She mentioned apricot blossoms before the war. Then she leaves, and you are alone again. Historians still argue whether musicians at court were allowed true creative freedom, or were essentially emotional servants tuning their art to the moods of rulers. Either way, this feels like both a blessing and a trap. You return to your harp, hands trembling. Apricot blossoms. You've never seen them? Not really. But once long ago, someone brought a branch into the palace. It had the smell of cool spring nights and soft dust. You remember because that day your music flowed like it belonged to someone else. So you begin, a slow circling scale, each note folding into the next. You imagine the petals dropping gently on palace stone, the quiet of a garden no one's walked in for years, the hush before a lover speaks and changes everything. You play until the sun tilts overhead. No applause, no cheers, just you and a string that finally mercifully breaks. The day of the banquet arrives, and you're not exactly brimming with excitement. You sit quietly as attendants oil your hair and press your best linen robe, muttering about presentation. You try not to roll your eyes, presentation. You're the blind harpist, not the heir to the throne. Nobody's looking at you unless you mess up. Then suddenly everyone's an expert in your craft. Your escort arrives, a young boy, maybe 10, all elbows and sandals, too big for his feet. He doesn't speak, just nudges your hand, and you're off. Step by step, through corridors so polished they echo back your own heartbeat. The boy doesn't slow down when your foot catches on a loose tile. You stumble. Keep walking. Eventually the air changes. It smells sweeter, heavier, like honeyed dates and dried roses crushed into velvet. You've reached the banquet hall, and now the nerves really begin. Mainstream historical fact, Persian banquets, especially under dynasties like the Sassanids, were extravagant affairs featuring music, poetry, wine, and performances all meticulously orchestrated to flatter and impress guests. As you're led to your place, the murmur of nobility ripples through the hall like waves. Conversations about politics, marriage alliances, and someone's ill-behaved peacock blur into white noise. But you catch just enough to realize this banquet's bigger than usual. Foreign envoys are present. That means every second of your playing will be dissected, not just for skill, but for national pride. You grip your harp as though it might float away without you. The banquet begins. Dancers enter first. You hear the soft chime of their anklets, the rustle of silk skirts. Then the food lamb with pomegranate glaze, grilled fish wrapped in fig leaves, sweet melons cut into stars. You don't see any of it, but you smell everything, and try not to drool on your strings. Finally, the signal. A single note from a reed flute. Your cue. You draw in a slow breath, lift your hands, and begin. Quirky tidbit, some Persian musicians believed wearing certain gemstones during performance, like lapis lazuli, could ward off bad energy and jealousy from rival performers. Whether it worked or not, your ring is cheap copper. The song you composed, the one about apricot blossoms, flows from you now, like you were born humming it. It starts soft, innocent, builds slowly. By the third verse, it becomes something aching. You don't know how else to describe it. You just hope the queen does. You picture her as you play, sitting on a golden cushion, face unreadable behind her veil. You imagine her lips pressed tight, her hands fiddling with her rings. Did she catch the shift in tempo when you modulated for longing? Did the harp's gentle tremble remind her of that spring before the war? And then, midway through a string phrase, you feel it. Not broken yet, but close. Your fingers skip it on the next pass. Then the next. You rearrange the composition in real time, rebalancing every note to avoid the weak link. It works, sort of, but you know she'll notice. Historians still argue whether the music at royal banquets was meant to entertain guests or to reflect the emotional state of the court itself. Judging by the silence as you finish it, might have been both. The applause is light, polite. No one throws figs at you, so that's a win. But you don't get summoned after the performance either. No whispered praise. No commission for a second piece. You just sit there, fingers numb, listening to the room swell back into laughter and gossip, as if you were never there. The boy returns, tugs your sleeve. Back to your quarters. He doesn't say a word, but you know what this means. You didn't fail. But you didn't shine either, which in this world is kind of the same thing. As you walk the corridor, someone brushes past you and murmurs, "The queen wept." You stop. From joy or sorrow, you ask, but they're already gone. You keep walking. What else can you do? You don't sleep that night. Not for lack of trying, mind you. The bed in your tiny stone chamber is the same scratchy, straw-stuffed mat it always is, and the oil lamp still flickers just enough to make the darkness dance. But your mind won't shut up. It replays every note, every mistake, every twitch in the queen's face, though to be fair, you've never actually seen her face. Your fingers twitch against your blanket, echoing the ghost of yesterday's performance. That almost broken string still haunts your hands. Why hadn't you replaced it before? Because replacements are expensive. Because you're not exactly flush with coin. Because no one gives the blind harpist a bonus unless he makes someone cry, and even then, it's hit or miss. Morning arrives with no fanfare. Just the sound of sandals slapping stone, and the too familiar voice of your patron barking your name through the door. You have another appointment. Mainstream historical fact, blind musicians were not uncommon in the ancient world, often supported by royal courts, as entertainers, prophets, or storytellers. In Persia, they could earn modest prestige, but remained dependent on wealthy patrons. You grab your harp, wrap yourself in your usual robe, and follow the now grumpy child escort down another corridor, this one scented faintly with olive oil and unwashed feet. Glamorous. This time, the setting isn't a grand banquet hall, but a private garden. You can tell by the feel of grass beneath your sandals and the chorus of cooing doves overhead. The queen's scent is unmistakable lotus blossom and something sharp like crushed mint. She's here. You sit. No announcements. No musicians. Just you and your harp and her. You begin again. No cue this time. No crowd to impress. Just the queen. You play the same piece, apricot blossoms, only slower, more tentative. Each note curls into the air like incense smoke disappearing before it lands. Halfway through, she stops you. Again, she says softly. You play it again. Different this time. More warmth, less ache. She hums along. By the third repeat, she's weeping. Quirky tidbit, it's said that Persian royalty believed tears during a performance meant the gods were speaking through the artist. Unfortunately, those gods rarely paid the artist's rent. She finally speaks. Not about the music, not about her tears. Just one sentence: you'll perform at my brother's funeral next month. You nod, silently, respectfully, and immediately realize that means no new strings, no rest, and no room for mistakes. But hey, at least you're on the schedule. That evening, the palace erupts in celebration. Someone has returned victorious from the eastern frontier. Drums echo through the halls. Perfumed couriers run shouting down corridors, scattering petals and bad poetry. And yet you sit in your room alone, tuning the same string that nearly betrayed you yesterday. Because even when the world parties, the harpist still practices. Historians still argue whether blind court performers were viewed with reverence or pity in ancient Persian society. Either way, you're beginning to suspect that pity doesn't come with a pension. There's a knock. Your patron again. He's drunk. He bursts into your room with a goblet of something vaguely wine-adjacent, sloshes half of it on your bedding, and declares the queen likes sad music. So make it sadder. Right. You'll just dip your harp in tears and see what happens. He laughs at his own joke, then slumps in the corner and starts snoring. You step over him, clutch your harp, and make your way to the courtyard. It's late, cool, quiet. You sit by the fountain, the water gurgling like a half-asleep poet, and strum. Not to practice, not to impress, just to remember why you started doing this in the first place. And maybe, just maybe, to feel a little free. Until the doves begin to sing with you. Until your fingers stop hurting. Until the melody forgets how tired you are, just for a while. The queen's brother dies 3 weeks later, and palace life grinds into a different rhythm. Slower, quieter, draped in ritual. Gone are the trumpets and tambourines, replaced by long processions, whispered prayers, and linen-wrapped statues. You're summoned daily to rehearse a new lament, a dirge, something heavy, formal, full of minor intervals, and the weight of mortality. You get a new harp for the occasion. Not as a gift, of course, just a loaner. Polished ivory pegs, fresh strings, a resonance so rich it almost plays itself. The kind of instrument normally reserved for the court's top-sighted performers. But that's the thing, isn't it? All the others play by ear, too. But you play by soul. Or so they say, usually right before they underpay you. Your patron stops referring to you by name. Now you're just the queen's blind songbird. Charming. Mainstream historical fact. Funerals in ancient Persia were deeply symbolic events involving music, incense, ritual bathing, and mourning chants performed by specialists. Royal ceremonies could last several days. The funeral is held at sunrise. You're led out hours before, wrapped in ceremonial linen, and seated beneath a silk canopy, while priests chant in Old Persian. Incense chokes the air, myrrh and cinnamon, and your throat burns, but you play on. The queen enters last, her grief palpable even without sight. You can feel the hush fall across the gathering like the whole empire is holding its breath. The lament you've written for her brother is simple. 3 motifs. One for childhood, one for legacy, one for death. The melody walks a tightrope too soft, and you're forgettable. Too dramatic, and you're exploiting pain. You begin. Your fingers glide across the strings, coaxing out grief in waves. The crowd disappears. The palace disappears. Even the queen disappears. It's just you and the music and the ghost of a man you never met. Somewhere in the second verse, a string snaps. Quirky tidbit, Persian musicians sometimes used gut strings treated with rosewater, believing it improved tone and pleased the spirits of the dead. Of course, it also made the strings more brittle. The sound is sharp, a little twang that ripples through the courtyard like a cracked teacup. You freeze for half a breath, then shift. Your hand compensates. You reroute the melody. Again, you finish the piece, barely. No applause, no sobs, just silence. Then a priest mutters something in a low, shaky voice, and someone rings a brass bell, signaling the end of the ceremony. You're led back to your chamber with all the grace and ceremony of a half-forgotten broom. No thank you, no eye contact, just the scent of rose petals trailing behind you. Historians still argue whether music at Persian funerals served a purely spiritual purpose, or whether it was also used to display court wealth and power. Given how many peacocks you passed on the way in, you're leaning toward both. Days pass. No summons. No practice. No one knocks. Your fingers for the first time in weeks are still. You sit in your room and listen. To the doves. To distant bells. To the silence. You start to wonder if your song was too sad. Or not sad enough. Or maybe, just maybe, you're no longer needed now that the grief has shifted into politics. At least you still have the loner harp. Well, had. The boy returns silent as always and collects it. No explanation. No replacement. You're back to your old chipped instrument. The one with 3 strings that buzz if you pluck too hard. You practice anyway. Because what else do? You practice in the dark with no audience. And no praise until your hands are blistered and your heart is hollow. You play for the night birds, for the ghosts, for the parts of yourself you're afraid might vanish. Because if you stop playing, you stop being. And in the palace, invisibility is just one missed note away from erasure. You're woken before dawn, not by the usual soft knock of the servant boy, but by a pair of guards. That's new. They don't say much, just grunt something about a private gathering. You're barely dressed and still crusted in sleep when they guide you through a side corridor and into a part of the palace you've never felt before. The air here is cooler, fresher, less incense, more open stone. You smell citrus trees and oddly cooked barley. The queen is waiting, not seated, standing, alone. She speaks, not through a translator, not through your patron, directly to you. She says she remembers the music. She says she cried again, but this time it felt like remembering, not mourning. Then she says something strange. We need a lullaby. For the whole city. You blink, not that it matters. She means it literally. A lullaby to soothe a restless people. Something soft and sacred to be played from the towers during the spring equinox. You're to compose it, immediately. Mainstream historical fact, music held a powerful role in Persian festivals like Nowruz, where melodies and chants were believed to renew the spirit of both ruler and realm. She leaves you there in a tiled courtyard, with nothing but your harp, a cup of something warm, and 2 guards who clearly don't appreciate your artistry. You get to work. The lullaby is gentle, but not sleepy. Hopeful, but not cheesy. It climbs like a vine and folds like fabric, wrapping around itself in ways only your fingers could understand. You hum as you play. Not for the queen, not even for the city. This one, for once, is for you. They record it on scrolls committed to memory, and 3 days later it echoes from the towers. A city sleeps to your hands. A queen bows her head in approval. But you're sent home with a bag of dried figs and a thank you. A thank you. Quirky tidbit, in some Persian texts, musicians were believed to have the power to charm the humors, essentially rebalancing the body's energy with rhythm and tone. Yet despite this sacred role, many were still considered glorified servants. You sit with your figs, listening, as your lullaby dances across the rooftops, in soft echoes. The harp's call travels further than you ever could. It washes over markets and temples, through courtyards and alleyways, even into the gardens, where no one speaks your name. Your patron visits one last time. He offers you a promotion of sorts. Teaching. Young musicians. Sighted ones, of course. But they'll learn your pieces, your methods, your tricks. It's not much, but it's not nothing. You accept. because the truth is being blind never made the job hard. The job was hard because people thought your blindness made you disposable, and yet here you are, still playing, still being heard. Historians still argue whether blind musicians in ancient Persia were merely tolerated or genuinely revered. But maybe that's the wrong debate. Maybe the real story is that you outlasted them all. Patrons, rivals, even kings, by doing the one thing none of them could. You listened, and in that listening, you created something no eyes could ever see. A sound, a feeling, a legacy. Your final student of the day bows awkwardly and scurries off, leaving you alone in the echo of strings. You rest your fingers on your harp one last time and play a few notes. Not a dirge, not a dance, just a little tune no one else will ever hear, because you earned that too. And now, as the music fades and the palace slips away into moonlight, you breathe a little slower. The harp still hums in the background of your thoughts, soft, steady, like waves against the shore. You're not alone in the dark. The strings remember your touch, and the songs you've played linger gently in the air. The queen. The guards, the garden, let them melt into mist. Let your shoulders loosen. Your breath, deepen your thoughts, quiet like a room after applause. You've survived another strange, beautiful, exhausting day in a world where every note mattered, and somehow you found your rhythm. So rest now, songbird. You've earned the silence. You've earned the dream. And maybe, just maybe, when you wake, there'll be music waiting for you once more. Sweet dreams.